Hello everyone and welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we are back making another video. I just got over being sick, so if I still sound a little bit weird, that is the reason why. I unfortunately missed out on The First Omen, which I absolutely loved. I was going to do a whole video talking about The First Omen and The Omen and maybe throwing a little Immaculate in there. So if you still want that video, I'm still down to make it, but it is definitely going to be a little bit late. But either way, I'm back here talking about a new movie releasing in theaters this weekend called Sting. I got a chance to watch this movie for the AMC Scream Unseen, and this is the third Scream Unseen that I've done. I've done a couple of the other, Screen Unseens. I think the first horror movie that I watched with them was, I believe it was called In the Darkness, which I thought was just okay. Then there was Lisa Frankenstein, which is my type of weird. I loved it. I know a lot of people walked out of that movie disappointed. Just, it struck the right chord with me. I also have a review out for that here on the channel. And this time around was Sting. And this movie is kind of perfect for this sort of situation because it is just a really fun, ridiculous, and campy horror movie that has a giant spider in it that's going to have just enough commercial scares to, make you jump in your seats, make you, have that creepy crawly feeling that you get watching a spider on screen. And it's just going to strike the right chord if you just want a fun date night horror movie or have this on the background during Halloween. I think it's a perfect type of movie for those type of situations. This will of course be a spoiler review for Sting, so if you have not had a chance to watch this movie just yet and you watch that trailer and you think it looks like the fun type of movie that you want to watch this weekend, go watch it, come back and watch this spoiler review. If you're expecting something more like an A24 horror movie or like even Evil Dead Rise to a certain extent, where that movie I absolutely loved, I think this movie will get a lot of comparisons to that because of the setting and some story beats that this movie has. I think if you're expecting something like that, you will probably be disappointed, but either way, if you want to see this, go check it out in theaters and then come back here and let's get into the spoilers. So what is this movie about? Well, like I said, it's about a giant spider. It literally comes down in a meteorite from space and it flies into this house, into this little a doll house that's inside of this house that reminded me very much of Hereditary. I actually really appreciated the title sequence at the beginning of this movie following this spider crawling around this dollhouse until it gets caught in the jar by the little girl in this movie. And there's a lot of fun moments and fun stylistic choices by the director in terms of how this movie is shot and some fun camera moves that this movie makes that made it feel like it has like a higher budget than it actually does have. But there are some fun moments with that. But that's essentially the basic premise, is this little spider comes down from space and starts crawling around this apartment complex, and a little girl catches it and decides to make it her pet because, she is dealing with a weird family situation where she has a new stepdad and a new baby in the house, and her parents are kind of getting along. They're dealing with a lot of stress with a new baby and a lot of problems in this apartment complex, and so this little girl is essentially on her own. She's a very moody teenager, and she now has a spider. She's very goth now, and she's gonna be very curious about how this creature is working, and she's going to be feeding it little cockroaches and doing all these different things that are a little bit dark and demented, and more reason for me to expand my list on Letterboxd of reasons why I don't want kids. But I think it's an interesting character to follow, at least for the first act of this movie, because she has this curious fascination with the spider that you as an audience member also have. And obviously with this being a campy horror movie about a giant spider, you're not really going to care about the characters all too much in this movie, but I think that this little girl does a good job at kind of, you're watching the movie through her eyes, you're seeing the parents deal with their thing on their own, but this little girl, feeding the cockroaches to the spider, it's really creepy, it's really gross, but then you're also like, yeah, I want to keep feeding the spider, keep getting it bigger and bigger. I want to see the spider go over and attack the other people in this apartment complex. I want to see the havoc kind of take over this entire place, because from the opening scene, there's a little cold open of seeing exactly what's going to happen later on in this movie with an exterminator, which, again, talking about things that I do appreciate about this movie is also the sense of humor that I have that this movie has at times. I think that at times this movie can take itself almost a little bit too seriously, but the opening scene has this exterminator that shows up. He sees that there's another van from a different extermination company that's already there. So he's like, why are you calling this other group when I'm the exterminator? I already came here last week. I know what I'm doing. You don't need to call these other people. And he goes in there, it's like, oh, they didn't even clean these vents. They didn't even do this right. And he's going to go in there and take care of it as if it's no problem whatsoever. And then he realizes exactly what the problem is, and he gets taken out at the beginning of this movie. And then you get to see the old woman who called the exterminator has serious dementia, and she goes over to the phone and calls another exterminator. It is a very funny joke to start this movie off, and it kind of sets a tone as to you know, this is the type of movie that you're going to get into. There's, you know, fun camera movements, there's fun camera shots of, you know, the spider going down this dollhouse. There's a sense of humor with the exterminator and this old woman that doesn't know what's going on at all, and the havoc that's happening around her. And there's also a demented little girl that is helping the spider grow into what it becomes by the end of the movie. Fun times. Another thing that I did appreciate about this movie is the fact that it is rated R, and I'm not one of those people that immediately dismisses PG-13 horror movies, because I think there are a lot of great ones out there. I don't think that you should dismiss PG-13 horror movies just because of that rating, because I do think that there are some diamonds in the rough. But that being said, when you're making a movie about a giant spider that is not taken as seriously, I think the kill sequences are very important. And I'm glad that this movie is rated R to have some very fun and inventive kill sequences in this movie. And when it comes to my audience that I watched it with in the Scream Unseen, you know, you're dealing with an audience that maybe didn't want to go into a movie about a giant spider. So the creepy crawly stuff and the spider crawling in the background of a shot of this, you know, the first woman who dies, I believe she was the first one to go. But it was a woman with a dog, or was it a cat? It was 2 weeks ago. I think she had a dog. But the woman with the dog, you know, the spider's like crawling in the background. I can hear some people behind me that are like, you know, crawling in their seats like, oh God, the bugs, the spider thing is just, you know, definitely not their thing. They're definitely getting creeped out by that aspect of it. But then it eventually like jumps on her face and it freaks people out, because, you know, if you're a human and you live in this world, at one point a bug probably flew into your face or jumped onto your face and you freaked out, and it was definitely a freaky thing. But then it crawls like into her mouth after she slips and falls onto the tub, and she like cracks her head open, and then it crawls into her mouth and starts like eating her from the inside. It is really twisted. And at this point in the movie, somebody sitting towards the front got up and walked out of the theater, which I thought was so funny. Along with everybody else in my audience, they all just started laughing at that point, because we just watched something that was pretty horrific and kind of funny at the same time with how brutal it was. And if you're a fan of horror, you know exactly the tone that this scene is going for. And that audience member was not having it whatsoever, and they walked out of the movie at that point, which was very funny. But again, if this movie didn't have moments like that, I don't think I would have had as much fun with this movie. This movie is also very weird. There's a lot of weird character choices and character quirks. Like I said, the little girl is very demented at times, but then also she's a cute little girl that's gonna, you know, want to, you know, make amends with her stepfather and have all these moments where they are trying to reconcile towards the end of the movie, and she's gonna become kind of a normal kid by the end. But at first, she's a demented little goblin child that's dealing with this little spider. Or there's a neighbor character who I thought was so funny in this movie. He just has such a deadpan way of talking. He has absolutely no emotion whatsoever, and as soon as he sees the spider, and you know, the girl wants to get a bigger tank for it because it's growing bigger at this point of the movie, and he decides, oh, I'm gonna call your dad and tell them that, you know, you have this giant spider, but oh, I don't want you to take the spider, kill the spider. I want to study this spider. I want to take it for myself so I can, you know, do experiments on it. And this guy's like, I think, what does he do? He feeds it fish at first, and then he like does all these different things with it, and it gets bigger in the container. At one point, it just blows up the container, and he gets like webbed up onto the ceiling. I don't know. There's just very weird character quirks with a character like this in specific that I just found extremely funny, and it has to be intentional at that point, because really the two parents in this movie are playing it straight, essentially. You know, they're not really doing anything too over the top. They don't really have any specific character quirks, but everybody else in the movie has some weird character quirks. That guy had a character quirk, the daughter has a character quirk, the neighbor with the dog had a character quirk, the old lady that lives in the top floor that has the dementia that's, you know, calling the exterminator multiple times, she has that character quirk. There's even I guess the sister of that old woman. I believe everybody's kind of related also in this movie. It's a weird family dynamic that all live in the same apartment complex apparently. But the sister of the woman with dementia, she is like the one woman in Ready or Not that has like the short, you know, perfectly straight hair that kind of has like this demented look in her eyes, and she makes these weird comments every once in a while. She's like the weird grandma that you kind of keep away in the distance that makes comments. You're like, yeah, okay, I'm gonna go over here now. She has like weird quirks like that. So everybody in this movie has weird quirks like that, which I thought also just made this movie more entertaining for me, because it's one of those things that you watch the film and you deal with these characters that you don't really care about, but they're entertaining enough because they're just weird enough to keep your attention. But that being said, the dad in this movie and the mom, I really didn't care about these characters too much, and honestly, the part that I was the most engaged with these characters was when the spider went for the baby, and the fact that the spider actually got the baby. You know, the baby doesn't die in this movie, but the spider straight up kidnaps the baby and then kidnaps the mom and the dad in one sequence that was also a really fun sequence. And the daughter at that point had her headphones on because the mom and dad were fighting. And if you're a kid who grew up in a situation where the parents were fighting all the time, that probably is extremely relatable. But she's just trying to ignore everything else around her, puts on headphones, doesn't hear a thing, and then the baby and her parents get kidnapped in this scene, which the spider for some reason doesn't kill them right away and like wraps them up in the webs to eat them later. Whatever, it's a movie, you need to have these characters survive because of the plot and the family elements. Okay, whatever, it was still a fun sequence. And once you get to the end of the movie, you tie back around to the beginning scene where the exterminator comes in to, you know, deal with the extermination problem. And I don't know if I'm pretty sure I was awake the entire time. I don't know if I fell asleep in the screening that I was at, but I don't think they ever really showed the other exterminators come up. Maybe I'm just forgetting because I watched this movie a couple weeks ago. I don't remember the other two exterminators really having a sequence where they get taken out by the spider. Maybe I'm just misremembering things. But you eventually get to the point at the end of the movie where the original exterminator comes back and he has his whole sequence and he actually survives that part. And so the movie goes on a little bit longer than I was expecting it to. You get the family all down at the end once, you know, the daughter figures out that she can use the mothballs and like puts it in a water gun and that kind of, you know, melts away the webs and can free her family. And they all go down into like the laundry chutes and they're all down there and by the like the trash compactor, and you have the one exterminator guy that is, again, so funny in this movie, and his reactions to everything was great, and he knows exactly what movie he is in. Also has some weird character quirks with how he reacts to things as well. But once he gets taken out, then it's just the family left. They go into the trash compactor and they smash the spider to death, essentially. And I mean, that's really it. I do think in terms of my complaints about the movie, it's tough with a movie like this. And, you know, if you've watched my reviews for a certain amount of time, you know that I don't give star ratings or number ratings or any sort of rating system, whatever, on my YouTube channel. I have a Letterboxd. I do give star ratings on there. So if you want to see if you care about ratings, you can go follow me on there. I hate giving numbered ratings for movies. I absolutely hate it. I started the channel off doing it for like the first few videos and I completely abandoned it because I just hate putting a number to a movie because I don't think that does a movie justice, because I had fun watching this movie. I was laughing my ass off. There's a lot of great fun sequences in here, but at the same time, I do think this movie is held back by its budget. It has some fun camera moves. It has some sequences that make you feel like you're watching a movie that has a bigger budget than it actually does have. I think the director does a good job handling the amount of money that they had. But at the same time, once you get to the end of the movie and you have the giant spider moving around, you can see the limitations in terms of how the spider can move. I don't know if they were using a puppet at times, if it was CG at times, but you can tell that they couldn't have the freedom to have the spider move around and do the things that it needed to do to actually be scary when it came to the last act of this movie, which I do think was pretty disappointing. There's also the characters in this movie that, like I said, all the ones with their separate character quirks are all fun in their own, but they're not necessarily characters that I care about. And same thing with the family. The movie did try to make me care about this family dynamic, especially with the end of the movie and, you know, the daughter finally calling the stepdad dad for the first time, or, you know, moments like that that you've seen in other movies before. You can tell that they're trying to push this, you know, bond between these two characters to a certain point where they do reconcile and they do become a father and daughter by the end of the movie. But I don't think the movie necessarily earned that. I think that it kind of took itself too seriously at that point, which kind of, you know, fought against the more campy and ridiculous tone that the rest of the movie had. And so that didn't quite work for me. But again, I don't know if this movie's intention is necessarily to be a movie where you're like, oh, I love the characters, I love their dynamics, I loved all these different things about it, because I think the movie is fun and campy enough on its own to be entertaining. And so to loop it all back to the beginning of this review, like I said, I think this is the perfect movie to watch with absolutely no expectation. Watch it with a group of friends, have fun with it, and once this movie is out of theaters and, you know, it goes on to streaming or wherever it ends up being, if you have this on in the background during like a Halloween party, perfect, because you can, you know, talk and you have fun, do all your things that you're doing on Halloween, you can drink, do whatever, you know, while this movie's on in the background, while the characters are doing the things that the characters are doing. When the spider's out and about killing people, that's when you bring your attention to the screen and you have fun with that. It's not a movie that, you know, you sit down all with your friends on Halloween and you focus on it. It's one that you have as you're eating food, as you're partying, as you're doing whatever you are doing, just to, you know, have something spooky on in the background that is something that you can have fun with, something that you can laugh with, because I do think that you're laughing with the movie and not at the movie, which I do think is an important distinction for a movie like this. So Again, it's a recommendation for me if you're expecting this type of movie and if you want this type of movie. If you're not wanting this type of movie, go watch The First Omen. Go watch the original Omen immediately after, because I think it, you know, ties together brilliantly. But that is going to be my recommendation for this film. Again, if you want to see my star rating, go check out my Letterboxd. I'm not going to tell you what I put, because I refuse. But that's going to be it for my review of Sting. If you did enjoy this review, make sure you guys subscribe to the channel. And like I said, if you did want my review for First Omen and Immaculate and the original Omen, I still kind of want to make it. Let me know in the comments if you still want to see that video. If not, I'll have reviews out for Sasquatch Sunset, which I will be watching tomorrow, which I cannot wait to watch that movie. I missed it at Sundance. And also Civil War. I am watching Civil War tomorrow as well. Weird double feature with Civil War and Sasquatch Sunset. That's going to be a fun one, but I will try to have reviews out for both those movies during this weekend at some point. So definitely subscribe to the channel, leave a like on this video, comment down below what you thought of Sting, and I hope to see you all in my next one.